Senators Barbara Boxer and Jay Rockefeller are now calling on members of the Dow Jones and Company Special Committee to take a closer look at News Corp's senior executives. In their letter, they wrote, "The American people need to be reassured that this kind of misconduct has not occurred in the United States and that senior executives at News Corporation properties in our country were not aware of or complicit in any wrongdoing." While Rupert Murdoch insists that he has no knowledge of wrongdoing here in the States, he's making the moves of someone who needs serious legal help. In addition to hiring 3 public relations giants in the last week, the New York Times reports News Corp has just hired this man, Brendan Sullivan Jr. Sullivan is known as one of the most accomplished criminal defense lawyers in the country, having represented the late former Senator Ted Stevens in his political corruption trial and Oliver North in the Iran-Contra affair. Joining me now, one of the senators calling for a closer look into News Corp's U.S. practices, California Senator Barbara Boxer. Thanks for joining me tonight, Senator.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Senator, what has provoked your interest specifically, and why direct your letter to Dow Jones?
Well, here's where we are, Lawrence, at this point. We do want to ensure the American people that their phones weren't hacked into, that there weren't payoffs going on, whether it's corporate espionage or anything else. We want to make sure that American laws have been followed, including the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits American companies. Remember, News Corp is an American company from paying people off to gain an advantage. And it looks like that has happened in Britain, and that would be, in fact, a violation of the law. And I think the fact that they are lawyering up says they take the letter that Senator Rockefeller and I wrote very seriously. And you asked my interest. I'm a senior member of the Commerce Committee, and Jay Rockefeller is a wonderful chairman of that committee, and we have teamed up here. We have oversight over communications and mergers, news mergers. So that's why we're very concerned here.
And you've mentioned in your letter Les Hinton specifically, who was at the Wall Street Journal and then at British Properties for Murdoch before that. It's that kind of cross-fertilization of the personnel that in this scandal starts to become pretty worrying, doesn't it?
It's very worrying, and that's why we wrote to this independent oversight committee that was a condition of the sale. When the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones Company, which owns the Wall Street Journal, when that sale went through, one of the conditions by the family who owned the Wall Street was that they in fact set up this independent committee. And the whole idea was to ensure the integrity of the Wall Street Journal. So what did they do? They hired somebody who was, frankly, is very closely entwined in this entire British scandal. He testified before the Parliament that there was only one newspaper reporter that actually gained information through hacking. He admitted that he approved payments to that news reporter and a private investigator that went to jail on this. So we're very concerned that the comments they've made so far is no problem, and we just want to make sure that's true, and that's why we sent this letter today.
And Senator, the attitude expressed in the Wall Street Journal, very defensive article this week about this situation, saying, hey, look, everybody does it. That's not the kind of thing I would imagine would give you much comfort about how things work in Murdoch's American media properties.
Well, they're saying a lot of things. As you said, they've lawyered up, they've hired PR people. There was even an op-ed piece, an opinion piece that ran against Senator Rockefeller and my idea here, which is that there were violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. They said, oh, that act had nothing to do with newspapers. It has to do with all American corporations. So they're fighting back, and it could get ugly, but I've got to tell you, truth has a way of coming to the surface, and we'll just keep asking the questions and making sure that our people are protected.
Senator Boxer, before you go, I got to ask you about this small matter of the debt ceiling. Is the Gang of Six proposal, as thin as it is right now, without specificity, something you think may be the thing that leads the way to a solution here?
I think it could be part of the solution, and there are things in it that I think are good. There are things in it that I question. If you want to ask me more details, I'm happy to say it, tell you what they are. But the best thing about it is that Republicans and Democrats have come together, and in this environment, it's really important, and it gives me hope. And I think, you know, again, there are things in there that I really think are good. For example, there's revenue, but in terms of budget enforcement, it doesn't look like those revenues have much behind it by way of budget enforcement where the spending cuts do. So these are things we need to look at. I do like the fact, Lawrence, that they fund the Highway Trust Fund out 10 years, which is terrific. As the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, we need to fund infrastructure. They do that. So there's good, there's not so good, but I do believe that this will give us some legs to put together something that will get us through this. I just want to say 89 times Congress has raised the debt ceiling, mostly under Republican presidents. I think that 18 times under Ronald Reagan, that was the most we ever did it. And not one of my colleagues ever played games like this. And you're playing with fire here. And America can't be a deadbeat nation.
Senator Barbara Boxer of California, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks.